Welcome back to the channel. So this week we're going to be carrying on in the similar form of last week's video with the Panzer 4, and this is not so much a shelf queen, but it's a kit I picked up and as soon as it came out, and I've just had it on the back burner. One of those Tamiya kits, you build it in a weekend. It's a lovely mojo builder, great thing to have. Tamiya kits in the stash, you don't need to worry about it, build them out the box. So again, we're not looking at construction here, we're just looking at some paint finishing, and this is going to be looking at the German grey, which is the incorrect term, but we'll call it that for the minute. And I'm actually going to be using some of the new lacquer paints from Mr. Colour. And for that we need some lacquer thinner. So the two that I've got here is the rapid thinner from Mr. Colour and the levelling thinner from Mr. Colour. So basically the rapid thinner is a very quick drying thinner and it flashes off very quickly, whereas the levelling thinner is slower. It's got a retarder in it, and it means it goes down and takes longer to dry, which gives you a more smoother finish. These are the three colours in question. So we've got 513, 514, 515, and these are basically like a modulation set. We're not going to get into any of that, and we're not really going to use much of this. I do a bit of modulating, but I feel it doesn't really work for what I'm doing, so we kind of move past that and just use it as a solid colour. What you can do if you want to get into modulating is you with a lot of pre-shading and so for instance you could do your primer, then you could do a pre-shade, then you could go on with the dark colour, and then you can then use varying tones of the lighter colours that are in the set. So you've got like a very dark purpley grey, I suppose, and then you've got more of a bluey grey, and then you've got a very light kind of turquoisey light blue grey, if you like. And the way you would do it is you'd start with the dark colour, and then you'd come up through, maybe using some of the mottling masks that are out these days, and just blocking in panels and stuff with the lighter colour to leave a blurred edge to the outside of where you're spraying, for instance. So that would be dark on the edges, lighter in the middle, and then lighter again in that. That would be like an extreme modulation, and you can kind of do it any way you want, really, and that's just the basic principle. You start with the dark colour and move up through the lighter shades, and it gives breaks up the colour, which is a monotone colour, really, and it gives it a bit of life. Here we're using the trusty wheel mask that I've got there. People have been asking where I got that one from. That's more or less irrelevant. It's an etched metal one from way back. I think I got that in sort of 2001 when I was first starting out. And it's from Royal Model, and they did 2 or 3 sets. That was set 2, I think, which is designed for numerous kits that were out at the time, and you've got a kind of template on the back with the numbers to each circle for the different wheels. These days, just get one of your circle templates, get a couple. If you look at the sizes, you can get some that are the in-between sizes of another one, which is quite useful. What I mean by that is you might have one that's 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, and then you might have another one that's 0.75, which is worth having just for that, for instance. So here we are spraying on. We're just starting off with the first colour, which in this instance I think is 513, and it's almost exactly the same colour as the plastic, and I didn't really like it. It's a bit too dark. I'm trying to look at German grey. As we've gone on a bit further, I'm still kind of thinking about it. I'm in two minds as to what colour it was. I've seen some original colour photos, and one in particular is like a bird's eye view shot of 10 or 15 vehicles, including tanks, auxiliary vehicles, and so on. There you can see I'm just using 514 there. This is the lighter blue. And there's an awful lot of variation between each vehicle. So that's the first thing. I wonder if there is quite a lot of variation in the colour itself. This is Dunkelgrau. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I've got a real feeling it's more like ROM 66 that you get in aircraft. It's more of kind of a purpley, blackish grey, something like that. I've been adding a lot of blue to it, which is a colour I like for the model. That's what this ends up being. It's like a bluey grey, and I really like that from a model point of view, but I'm not so sure that's what the colour actually looked like. It looks more of a sort of blacky purpley colour. But needless to say, it is certainly not XF63 from the Tamiya range. So You can spray your model whatever colour you want, but if you want to get close to the colour that it may have been, I wouldn't use the Tamiya colour, and you'll find in the call-outs they're often asking you to use XF63, and that is some way off what German grey was. So that's just something to bear in mind. So as always with new paints, I thought I'd jump on these. They did a 4BO one as well, and spoiler alert, we test that soon in a vehicle that needs to be painted 4BO. Now here I'm just having a little go at modulating. So we've got the dark colour on first. We've got 513 is all over the turret. Now I'm just going in lightly with a kind of mottled pass with 514 now, and just sort of picking out the centres. And that was all you saw of that. That's because as I did it, I didn't really like the effect. And I chose to just go straight over with it. But what you would do, so with these wheels here that we're actually picking out the silver rims using trusty Mr. Colour 8 for our polished highly polished silver colour. If you took this wheel, for instance, you would spray the whole thing in 513, and then you'd hit the middle hub and the domed section with your 514, the lighter colour. But you'd perhaps leave the outer ring of rivets there in the darker colour. That's the principle. And then that's kind of like a shading, highlight, all that sort of thing happening in one go. So got a little bit of painting outside where we want it here. Got a bit of over painting there. So just running in now with what I already sprayed these wheels with, which is the XF85, the rubber black. This is just going in with a highly thinned mix just to let it run in. It looks like I'm brushing it, but what I'm really doing is just kind of letting the capillary action do its job, and I'm just sending it in whichever way I want. Now, if you were to leave it like this, it would show up. It would look quite rough. You would see that it had been brushed on over the sprayed effect. But we get this one a little bit muddy, so we don't need to worry about that so much. As long as it's a clean definition, it doesn't really matter. Picking out the tools as well, as usual. So any metal, I like to paint as rubber black, as we've done so far in the series. I am leaving jerry cans and the tie-down straps and the jack. I think I may leave that German grey. You can kind of do either on German vehicles. The jack and the jack block is mostly overpainted with the base coat of the vehicle, but you can also pick it out in the metal colour because it does add a bit of definition when you're looking at single colour schemes. It's always useful to try and pick out stuff and get some variation going if possible. And there you can see just using a fine brush to pick that out. Same with the machine gun barrels. This is all XF85 rubber black. Now that looked like a great big dollop of it, but it's very heavily thinned, so it doesn't matter if you get it on like that. If you're doing it straight from the pot and you put a blob on like that, you'd find that there would just be a blob at the end. What I've got is it's mixed with the levelling thinner. So I've got to be a bit careful, and in fact the only way I can kind of do it is by putting blobs on, because if you actually start brushing when you've got your paints mixed with lacquer thinner, it will eat through the paint below if you work it too much. You've got a short window, for instance. So what I do here with detail painting is I have quite a heavily thinned mix and let it just run to the edges using surface tension just to bead up at the edges, and then it will just level itself down. Tracks again, so these are the link and length tracks, which I've already glued up on the vehicle when the wheels were set and then taken it off in two sections, and they are sprayed with the rubber black. Again, same technique. I'm just going over here with a dry brush, and this is literally a dry brush from the Citadel range, but any wide brush will do, and just dry brushing on some of that highly polished silver again, just really trying to pick out those wide metal parts. I'm not trying to get into the depths of it, which I do a little bit, but that's fine. Like I said, we're going to make this one quite dirty, so all I'm doing is getting the silver there in the first place, and then we'll bring that silver back at the end as well, but I'm just putting it on while I've got it there for the moment, and then we'll glue all this on the vehicle and then weather it together. So if I can't get in behind the fender, for instance, at least I've got a bit of silver on there already. So that's the idea. And as you can see, this is what I did before it was painted. I put the tracks on and glued them in place with a break in the middle of the sprocket, and underneath the idler, and leaving the sprocket on its polycap, which means you can move it. That's what you always want to do with track links, whereas individual tracks or link and length tracks, you need to have some movement on the sprocket, because that's the fixed position, because the teeth will only lock in at one point. So if you glue your sprocket down and you can't move it, if it's off, then the whole thing will be off. Whereas having a fixed idler and road wheels, it doesn't matter, because the tracks just slide over them. So that's an important thing to remember. You want to glue the sprocket in last, after the tracks are all together. Now, typical, as always with this whole filming of this series, I do one side to get myself in the zone, and I do it without filming it, and I think, oh great, now I got the technique. Go to the other side, turn the camera on, and it just doesn't work the same. It just doesn't. It's the plague of the camera. And the problem I got here is where this top run along the return rollers is one piece, and where it's joining in on the sprocket, they were individual pieces that I bent around the sprocket. And as the glue is set, I've just not noticed that last individual link should be a little bit tighter to the sprocket, and it's obviously sprung up as the glue's dried. So what I need to do here is glue that bit that I'm pinning down there, which is the long length. I want to pin that down and have that stuck there. Plastic glue's not always great for this, so you might want to use a dab of super glue if you need the hold. And then once that's glued and firmly down, then I move this other bit and clamp that down as well. So you can see getting some straws out just to force that down while the glue sets. And it looks tricky, and it looks a bit of a pain, but it's not. When you're doing it, it's quite straightforward and simple. You just go through the process, and as soon as you've got it all clamped in and it holds where it needs to be and the glue is set, all will be fine. But it is a tricky thing to show on camera. But I think you get the idea there, what I'm trying to do. And again, it's preparation. What I've done there is not paid attention when I was putting the tracks on before the painting. So it's, as always is the case, take your time and make sure everything fits correctly. This isn't Tamiya's fault. Can't blame Tamiya. This is my fault. I haven't glued the track down correctly. So even on a straightforward Tamiya kit, you can still have issues if you don't pay attention. So it's one thing to bear in mind. I do tend to rush build sometimes when I'm doing it for filming as well, which is not great, and it's something I don't like really. It's an aspect of the videoing. You can go two ways. You can take your time and you won't probably get enough content, or you can go for content, and that means sometimes you've got to kind of find speedy ways of getting through builds. So that's where a lot of the problems come that I get. If I was actually sat in there, taking my time and doing a little bit here and there, I wouldn't get any of these problems. But that's I'm happy with it. I like getting the videos out, so I'm not worried if I, make a little bit extra work for myself here and there. I do tend to fix it though, so that's the thing. If I make a mistake and I notice it, I don't go, oh, it's just a video. I'll leave it. I usually find it's actually quite good for creating content, and you can show how I fix it. So we've got the same thing here, although this is to do with tension. So as we're tensioning up the track here, obviously it's going to be glued under tension. So what we've got to do is get everything knitted in nicely around the back of that idler, just to give us enough to join up these bits of tracks here under this last road wheel. So again, you just work around, you just glue your points. Again, this is where super glue would be very useful, just for pinning here and there, so it holds it. Then you can use your extra thin or a thicker glue, so Revel Contactor or the thicker Tamiya glue is actually better here. I'm using extra thin because, well, I just like to, but it's not necessarily the best glue for tracks. A thicker glue with more time to set is actually better. Sometimes gives more, it's less, the glue creates the bond, whereas extra thin is melting the plastic, whereas other glues, the actual glue is holding the two parts together, and sometimes that gives you more workability. So that's something you might want to think about. And I've decided now to jump on with a bit of super glue here, so that's what I've got. I just put a dab in to get that held together and then finish it off with the Tamiya extra thin. Now you can see, pushing on the sprocket, it's all a bit off, but because we can move the sprocket, it comes good in the end. So when the top layer is all glued, that gives us enough to move around. So here we go, we've got this large decal that we're doing, 522. Now that was all one piece of carrier film, so I've done the old trick again of cutting all around each number, and I'm going to put them on individual to try and get rid of that large block of carrier film. So just peeling that off there. And then applying it to the model. As you can see, there's no carrier film visible anywhere. This isn't about silvering. Silvering's a different thing. You could still get silvering on the decals here, but what we would have is a great big rectangle around those numbers, which then we'd have to try and get rid of. And this just eliminates that straight away. You can see where I haven't cut quite behind that last two that there is a bit of carrier film there, but it all melts down. Or it may even have been separate. There we go. Yeah, so it's gone. So I did get on quite well cutting that through. It is a bit more of an advanced technique doing this, and what that means is some of the decals can obviously curl up, or the placement's a little bit difficult, or you can accidentally rip them, so you just need to be careful on that front. You know, if you're at all worried, then just don't cut it. You just put it on as a block and it's fine. You can get rid of it with varnishes and stuff, but I like to do this. It's an important part of the modelling for me. I'd rather spray on the markings if I possibly could, but this is the best alternative really. And it's a good way of getting around the Tamiya decals, which are notoriously quite thick, so the carrier film does show up. But there you can see, just once they're all on, you just kind of move them together, and once they're placed, all is well. And there you can see the difference. Just making sure they're in line here, so the 5 and the 2 are matched up either side. And there we are, all the decals added to the model, and now it's a very clean finish. Everything's just how I want it. It's got, you know, everything is nicely defined, all clean, no massive blobs of paint here, there and everywhere where it shouldn't be. Everything's just nicely together. So I wanted to actually put this one on a base, so carrying on from what we did with the Churchill build a few weeks ago, this one's a little bit different because I got quite a heavy bit of MDF, so that's obviously not going to bend in at all. It's not going to pull it in. So I'm using Daz clay just to make up the groundwork, just an easy cheap way of doing that, and that's using plenty of water and spreading it on with your fingers and just trying to level it out. And once you're happy with that, you can then smooth it down with water on your finger, and that gives you a nice smooth level surface. As you can see, super fast here. And all I'm trying to do here, I was going to add some figures walking past, but I thought we'd leave it quite minimalistic. So using a bit of damp kitchen roll here, I'm just kind of texturing it a little bit and smoothing it at the same time. So I'm pressing it down and dabbing it. And once that's sorted, I've added a bit of texture groundwork along the middle there as well. That's just AK stuff. I've lost that footage unfortunately, but that is just it's just straight out the pot. AK and ammo do it. It's pretty much like a PVA glue with bits of small stones in it, really. And then using the brown colour again just to paint the groundwork where the grass is going to be. We're going to have, this is like Russian steppe, so it's going to be very low vegetation, low grass, with a kind of track road going through the middle. So painted all over that now, and I've got this filler that I've it's just cheap filler that I've mixed brown paint with, and I'm just using that to build up where the tracks are, so it actually sinks in quite well to the ground level, gives it that weighted appearance. So just kind of put that on with a spatula and spread it about. And then put the tank on, and then with a wet brush just kind of wash it all towards the tracks, so that when it's dry I can take the tank off and it'll all sit there nicely. I think that's quite effective. It's looking quite good. So just washing off the tracks. So now once that's dry, some of it never really dries. You can see at the front here, the water kind of gets trapped in it, but it's not a problem. We're overcoating all of this. So this, again, I'm going to be using the static grass applicator, which you don't need to use. You know, you can sprinkle it on, like I've said before, and use an airbrush to kind of make it lift up and spread it around. This is that's the one I've got. So in this I add static grass as well as some larger clumps from some vegetation, really. And just tap it out all over the glue. And it's meant to be like sort of browny autumnal grass. I'm looking at maybe an August, September kind of time for this vehicle. So at the end of the season, low Russian steppes, already starting to get a bit cooler. That's my plan. It looks quite good. When I've knocked out the excess, I just then add on a bit more glue and then put some more static grass in, knock off the excess, and that's what I'm using. It's a mix of stuff. And now pigments again, just to use them up, like I said, back along on the Churchill video. I just want to use up these Humbrol pigments. So this is a good way of doing it, using them on the track. So just brush it in with almost like a makeup brush. Don't know where I got this from. And there you can see it's starting now to take on a kind of nice dusty appearance, good colour. Looks quite natural, especially with the grass. This grass is much better than what we did on the Churchill. And that was intentional. I was trying to just do it in a basic way and then build it up. I was quite pleased with how this came out. Work all that in. And then with the old Dyson, just run over that just to take off most of it and give some let some of that wetter, darker earth show through. Now you can see the kind of way we're going to pose it and how it's going to look. So now we're on to weathering. And for this, it's a lot of streaking effects I'm doing with oils and enamel washes and all that sort of thing. All the way through. It's just using a wide brush here just to give that kind of initial layer, and that's what it's all about. It's all about layers, about working up through the layers, not having tons of thinner, keeping everything very smooth and trying not to get tide marks and that sort of thing. Just trying to place the weathering and you try and get an effect on which is purposeful, not just chucking it on and hoping for the best and see what's left. Lots of blending with a wide brush, then leaving it and then coming back to see what we got and then going over it again in a kind of different way, and so on and so on. And just building up those layers. This is all over a matte coat. This is all finished. There's no more overcoating now. So that model, as we showed you before the weathering stage, it was matted down, not heavily, so it's got a bit of sheen to it. It's kind of like semi-gloss, I suppose, maybe a bit more on the matte side of a semi-gloss finish, if you think about it like that. And then I'm going to use the oils to build up a sort of patina and give a matte finish to it. Now you can see different coloured oils, bit more staining over the decals, running down, all sort of comes together and works quite well. It just all builds that effect. And now we're going to try and do some streaks that will actually stay there, so some quite strong streaks. And this is the effect right there. It's what I mean. We're trying to place a streak there now and not rub it away and just lightly blend it in just like that. It's just a run, a rain mark, whatever. Maybe a bit of rust inside the bolt and it's run down. It could be anything. And then we just blend that away where it's a bit heavy and then pull it down again and again and again. Just trying to get it straight down. And all of that will just layer up and look quite good. Not heavily abused. This vehicle hasn't really done a lot. This is the later model. So I know that the 38Ts were in Poland and in France, but they didn't. They weren't the same vehicle that then went into Russia. They would have been overhauled if they were, because these are a different variant. So that's something to bear in mind. This is not a vehicle that's gone all the way into France and then gone all the way into Russia. It's probably been produced in the original factory and then run out from there straight over to Russia, mostly on a train. So it's not going to have had a hell of a lot of time to get totally beaten up. It's not like the 35T, which did have a long life and they weren't producing them, so the same vehicle that went into France did come all the way back through. That's something just to bear in mind. I've noticed a few people got confused when this one came out, saying about it being the Battle of France. That's not this variant. This is a later model, one of the latest versions actually. So just something to bear in mind. Now you can see with dust washes and that sort of thing, we're up on the fenders there, quite heavy, getting dust wash all around. This is to try and give the feel of going down dusty tracks, dusty roads. It kicks up the dust in a quite a long train of vehicles, if you like, and then it lands and you get that kind of layering like that. So that's what we're going for here, and this is just a heavy pigmented oil wash of dusty colours, muddy colours, dusty browns, light browns, dark browns, all that sort of thing mixed together. And again, we're just kind of hinting at that, trying to tell a story again. This is what I keep going back to. We're just trying to give the feel of a dusty vehicle. So we're going to start with oils to give us a base layer, to then build up from that layer with more oils, and then on top of that we're going to start using pigments direct onto the model as well. So that's what we're doing there. It's all about the layering. If you just chuck the pigment straight on, you'd miss all of the fine detail. And now working on the back, so this is going to be a particularly dirty area, so we're starting with that dust wash at the minute, and we're just streaking it down where it kicks up and runs down. That's the idea. Kicks up off the tracks, everywhere, you know, off the dust of the road, everything like that. And you see this colour as well, it's really quite nice. That's not what this video is all about, but where we've used that new Mr. Colour, it's got a really nice hint of blue to it. Like I said, I don't know if this is anything like the original colour used on the vehicles, but I certainly like it. It's a very nice alternative to what's out there. It's quite good. Now just working on the lower hole here behind the road wheels, again starting with our washes, running in there. It all runs down the bottom. I don't tend to weather the underside, but I think for this case I do, just for the sake of it, because we've got such nice detail under there from Tamiya. And I'm just using that edge there to run it back up towards the fenders. That's what I was doing there, trying to get underneath. And then a good heavy wash over the road wheels, because again, this is the layering, so we're starting off. We're chucking a nice brown wash over there to get that instant base layer. And then we're going to work up from that with more neat oils and pigments. So now we're on to pigments. Once all that's dry, I've gone over the tracks just with pigments and the road wheels and just given a light dusty feel. So like I say, usually I've shown you the one side and then just showing you the rear here, which I thought was very effective. And that is just over the top of that dust wash that we've been doing. I've just gone on with pigments and just brushed them down and then brushed them up with a wide brush. Nothing special. It's not difficult. It's very easy. I've done this one side where my finger's touching, worked around the back and left it to the other side. We're going to show you doing the other side. But on the rear, I just thought that was quite effective. And that's just, again, exactly what we've done with the oils, only doing it with pigments. So being very subtle. You can stick a great big brush in your pigment pot and spread it all over. Or you can be quite subtle. You can use a small brush. You can put it on gently. You can place it where you want it to be to show the effect that you want to give. And that's something I would encourage going forward. You know, don't just slap it on, for instance. Try and be a bit more artistic with it, if you like. You know, just try and emulate what you think it would be rather than chucking it on there and hoping for the best, which tends to be a thing people think with armour. You know, oh, you can just weather it and hide these things. And it's better to start how you want it to be and not try and base your modelling on hiding things. It's better to try and progress and show some sort of natural finishes. So we are lifting it a bit here, I hope. I've had a few comments before with people saying, oh, you know, it's very basic and stuff. I mean, that is the whole point to the playlist. It's we're building up. So if anyone is sort of thinking, oh, it could be done better, well, stay tuned, because it will be done better as we go forward. I'm just trying to take everyone through slowly, so that this series of videos is here for people to, from starting with nothing and a few simple techniques to try and get some interesting finishes. And I think they're realistic and effective, personally. So now on the road wheels, what you've just seen for the tracks is what I did, just went over the rest of the tracks with that. And now with more pigments, I am just chucking it on at the back there, because that's a bit different there. But when we're getting around the wheels, I'm not got much pigment. The pigment that's there, I'm just kind of working it in. And I'm going round and round and working it in with this wide brush. And then I'm just adding a little bit more here and there if I need to. But generally, you don't need too much. You just use what's there and just pull it around and try and get it to where you want it to be. Clearing it off, obviously, the rubber parts of the road wheels that would touch the track, because they'd be the cleanest. They'd almost be polished themselves as well. But just working it into those road wheels, those large road wheels, it's very effective. Pulling out from the centre as well, so once you've got it all around, then you can pull from the hubs in the centre outwards in a kind of circular motion, and you'll find it will then pull the pigments in directions. It looks quite effective again. So this is going against everything I said. Looks wise, it looks like I'm just plastering it on, but I'm not. I'm being very subtle. I'm just using a wide brush, and the effect is spreading it around. And then you can use your finger like this just to rub it off the high points, so that clears off the bolt heads and that sort of thing, which obviously wouldn't potentially have the pigment or mud or dust land on them. It would be more inside them, and that just gives an effect as well. Again, running over the tracks, it's just kind of giving a polished surface to it again. Now, not neglecting the sides. So like I said, we'll show you the sides. So I'm just kicking the pigment up, like where a bit, clod of mud or something's hit the side and from the track jumped up for the side of the fender. Working it into the corners there as well. I can't stress enough, I'm placing this. I'm not doing what it looks like. I've placed the pigment and then I'm using the wide brush to spread it back from there. But I don't want that heavy pigment all over the place. Now, just using some of these useful washes that you get from Ammo or AK, they both do the same thing. This is the engine grime, and this just gives a very nice, effective finish, cutting through all that dust with a kind of grease or oil stain. And again, don't try and break it up. Try and be different in the sense that these bolts would leak grease at different points. So when the tank is stopped, the wheel would be there and it would run downwards. And then when it stops the next time, that stain will be there, but the wheel would have moved. So you can actually send them sideways. Because as it's a stain, it happened before the wheel moved. And it's just an effective little trick that adds this level of detail. Now I do blend some of this out to give a wider stain and not so much others, and let it merge in with the pigment as well. And again, it's all about that blending, which is what we're doing. Blend it all in, and then go back again and cut back through if you want. It's it's whatever you like. If you look at some real vehicles or look at some pictures of modern vehicles, you'll see that the more random you can be, the better. And sometimes less random. Sometimes it is very obvious. I was only thinking yesterday, I drove past a white van which had mud completely up to one side in a kind of shape. And when I looked the other side, it was exactly the same. And it would have looked really strange as a model, and you would have said, oh, that's very unrealistic. And yet there it was. It just depends how it goes. And obviously we pick our subjects to look good. So, if you picked a subject and you want to copy it and it doesn't then perhaps look quite the way you'd think it would, but that's what you've done. Don't listen to what anyone else says. Use your reference or use your idea or whatever that would be. And the whole point is just to have fun. So we're on that note. I think it's time to wrap this one up. I'll just finish off these wheels, but we've got some pictures coming now with the tank on the base. I have painted the figure. I haven't shown that here because I'm trying to work on figures. This is the best figure I've painted, although he really does need a matte coat. It's a bit shiny. That's the patina from me holding it. But I think what we'll probably do is move towards Citadel paints and then into oils. I think oil blending is where we're really going to hit the sweet spot. But we'll be back to figures shortly. So as always, thanks for staying tuned. Thanks for following on with the playlist. If you haven't already, do consider subscribing to the video and giving it a like, letting me know your thoughts down below in the comments. If you want to support the channel, there's a couple of ways you can do that following the links in the description. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.